Welcome to this episode of the story. Subscribe as soon as possible. Chapter 19, The Burning Pain of the Star. Chart Brand. When Cassandra woke up amidst the jolting, the iron chains were digging into the flesh of her wrists. The vibration of the ox cart rolling over the gravel road made her stomach churn, mixed with the metallic smell of the memory crystal after it had been burned. That was the last fragment she had snatched from the ruins of Troy, and now it was pressing against her waist, like a hot branding iron. Awake? The old slave driving the cart turned his head and spat. His eyes were so cloudy that they seemed to be covered with a layer of white mist. The priest of Athena said that an eye of Osiris like you can be exchanged for 10 mu of good land in Athens. Cassandra sat up abruptly, and the crystal fragment at the back of her waist suddenly pierced into her flesh. Memory fragments surged like a tide. 3 days ago, the old slave had handed her an olive branch by the city gate of Troy, and his eyes had been clear then. Yesterday, in the Greek military camp, she had seen a priest pierce his temple with a silver needle and pour some glowing mucus into it. Now the inconspicuous scar at the back of his neck was faintly glowing with the jolting of the ox cart, like a cheap gem. "Do you remember your name?" she asked hoarsely, her fingertips quietly touching the pottery shard hidden in her boot. The characters written in her mother's blood seemed to come alive amidst the jolting. Those cuneiform characters were crawling up her skin, forming a small star chart mark on the inside of her wrist. The old slave's movement paused, and a glimmer of clarity flashed in his cloudy eyes. He was about to speak when he suddenly twitched violently, his hands clutching his throat tightly, and a strange noise like a jammed gear came from his throat. Cassandra saw a thin crack appear in the scar at the back of his neck, and mucus of the same color as the memory crystal flowed out, glinting with an eerie green light in the sunlight. "Don't force him to recall," a cold voice came from behind the cart. Two priests in white robes were following on horseback. Under their hoods, mechanical jaws similar to Odysseus were revealed. Forcibly awakening purified memories will only make the container useless. Cassandra lowered her head, pretending to straighten her wind-tousled hair, and took the opportunity to scratch the star chart mark on her wrist with her fingernail. The stinging pain reminded her of her younger brother's amulet. In the knot braided with their mother's hair, there was half a pottery shard exactly like the one in her hand. 3 days ago, when her younger brother was sent onto the ship, he had secretly given her a small wooden horse carved from wood, saying, "Wait for sister to come back and teach me to play." Now that she thought about it, there must have been something hidden in the wooden horse. The ox cart suddenly stopped. A canyon appeared ahead, and the rock walls on both sides of Suddenly, the ox cart stopped. Ahead, a canyon appeared, and the rock walls on both sides were engraved with eye-shaped symbols. The priests dismounted their horses, and one of them raised his scepter towards the rock wall. The eye symbols suddenly glowed red, and a huge star chart formed in the sky above the canyon. Cassandra felt a searing pain at the back of her neck. She knew the container mark branded by the priest was responding to the start's call. "Go in." The priest opened the fence of the ox cart, and the crystal at the top of the scepter hummed. "Athena is waiting for you inside." The depths of the canyon were filled with a pungent aroma, like a mixture of myrrh and molten metal. Torches on the rock walls illuminated countless excavated caves. In each cave sat a person chained up like her, their eyes as empty as 2 stagnant pools of water, and each had a glowing scar at the back of their neck. Cassandra counted. There were exactly 36 caves. With her, there were 37. "Eye of Osiris, no, 37. Welcome home." A woman's voice came from the shadows at the end of the cave. The tone was as gentle as flowing water, yet it sent a chill down Cassandra's spine. She finally made out that it was a woman in silver armor. The olive branch pattern on her helmet glistened with a metallic sheen in the torchlight. It was the Athena she'd seen in the temple murals. However, something seemed off about this Athena. Her skin was too fair, like glazed pottery. There was an unnatural seam around her neck, as if her head could be removed. What sent a shiver down Cassandra's spine the most were her eyes. There were no pupils, only a constantly rotating star chart, and the red dot in the center of the star chart was flickering in time with Cassandra's heartbeat. "Don't be afraid." Athena reached out her hand. Her fingertips glistened with the luster of mother of pearl. "Becoming a container is not a punishment, but an honor. Your memory will merge with Athena's, and you will gain eternal life." Cassandra stepped back abruptly, and the crystal fragment at her waist grew hot again. This time, instead of fragmented memories, a complete scene flooded into her mind. In a glowing hall, people in white robes were using silver knives to cut open the heads of the living, extracting the memory cores and placing them into silver armors, similar to Athena's. Those defective containers that weren't selected were thrown into a huge furnace. The smoke rising from the furnace condensed into human shapes and was then piped to various caves. "You're not gods at all." Cassandra's voice trembled with fear. She took out the pottery shard from her boot, and the characters written in her mother's blood glowed with golden light in the torchlight. "Your memory, stealing thieves." Athena's silver armor suddenly split open, revealing a chest full of gears. Her voice became shrill, as if countless people were speaking simultaneously. "Memories should be managed. Chaotic memories only bring destruction. Why do you think Troy fell? Because their memories were full of betrayal and greed." Cassandra suddenly remembered her father's secret room, the room she'd sneaked into as a child. There was an ancient map on the wall, and Atlantis on the map was entangled with countless chains. When she'd asked her father what it was, he'd only said it was a country punished by the gods. Now she realized it was not punishment, but harvesting. "Bring her here." Athena's mechanical arm suddenly extended and grabbed Cassandra's ankle. Cassandra fell to the ground, and the pottery shard flew out of her hand, landing right in front of a cave. The woman in the cave stirred. A glimmer of light flashed in her eyes, and her fingers curled slightly, as if she wanted to pick up the pottery shard. It was a Trojan woman. Cassandra recognized her as the harpist at the court. A month ago, she'd been playing and singing the epics of Troy at a banquet. Now her eyes were so empty that it seemed she'd never had any memories. But when the pottery shard neared, the scar at the back of her neck darkened, and a bit of bloody foam spilled from the corner of her mouth. She mumbled a few words. "Horse, wood, the Trojan horse." Cassandra's heart raced. The harpist was one of the few who knew the secret of the Trojan horse. She must have wanted to tell her something. Cassandra struggled to pick up the pottery shard, but the mechanical arm held her down firmly. Athena's other hand had already pressed against her temple. "Relax," Athena's voice grew gentle again. "The memory extraction will be a bit painful, but then you'll understand that forgetting is the best relief." Intense pain shot from her temple, as if a red-hot awl was churning in her brain. Cassandra saw her memories being pulled out like a glowing thread coiling around Athena's mechanical arm. The joy of shooting a deer for the first time at 10, the shyness of secretly kissing the maid in front of the altar at 15, the determination of her mother when she'd stuffed the cloth bag into her before her death. These precious memories were being transformed into cold energy, making Athena's silver armor shine even brighter. Just as her consciousness was about to fade, the memory crystal at her waist suddenly burst into a blinding light. The place where the crystal fragment was embedded in her flesh burned with pain, yet it strangely counteracted the pain of memory extraction. Cassandra saw countless faces emerging in the crystal. The priests of Atlantis, the pharaohs of Egypt, people in strange robes. Their lips were all moving, as if saying the same thing. The star chart is both the key and the shackle. Cassandra subconsciously repeated this sentence and suddenly understood the true meaning of the characters written in her mother's blood. She suddenly bit through the tip of her tongue. The intense pain gave her back her strength. She grabbed Athena's mechanical arm with her handcuffed hand and pressed the memory crystal firmly against it. An ear-piercing scream resounded through the canyon. White smoke rose from where the crystal and the mechanical arm met. Athena's silver armor began to peel off, revealing the flickering wires and gears inside. The eye symbol suddenly went out, and the people in the caves looked up. A glimmer of clarity flashed in their empty eyes, and the scars at the back of their necks fell off like red, hot branding irons. Impossible! Athena's star chart eyes spun violently. How could unpurified memories? Because memories are not your fuel. Cassandra stared at her disintegrating body and suddenly remembered the harpist's words. They're your poison. She suddenly understood the true purpose of the Trojan horse. It was not a weapon for besieging the city, but a container for transporting unpurified memories. When the Greek coalition forces pretended to retreat, What was hidden in the Trojan horse was not soldiers, but memory crystals like the one in her hand, filled with the real memories of the Trojans, enough to destroy these monsters that relied on pure memories to survive. Athena's body was falling apart. Gears and wires scattered all over the ground, revealing the core inside, a huge memory crystal. Countless tiny figures were floating in it, and Cassandra even saw her father's face. The crystal suddenly cracked, and the figures rushed out like birds breaking free from their cages, disappearing into the shadows of the canyon. Cassandra stumbled to the harpist's cave and picked up the pottery shard on the ground. The harpist's eyes had regained their luster. She used all her strength to grab Cassandra's wrist, her fingernails digging deep into the flesh. The horse, in Sparta, go find her. Before she could finish, her head dropped, and the scar at the back of her neck turned completely black, like a piece of burned-out charcoal. Cassandra knew she was dead. Her body had been destroyed by the forcibly awakened memories, just like the old slave. The canyon began to shake. The eye symbols on the rock walls exploded, and gravel rained down. Cassandra picked up the bronze dagger dropped by the harpist, pried open the chains on her wrists, and ran towards the entrance of the canyon. As she passed the cave, she saw more people waking up. Some were crying, some were roaring, some were biting each other. The memories that had been suppressed for too long were venting in the most violent way. When she ran out of the canyon, she saw the two priests on fire. The mechanical bones under their white robes crackled like two bonfires. The old slave's ox cart had overturned by the roadside. He was lying on the ground, and a large crack had opened in the skin on his back, revealing the intertwined wires inside. Cassandra hesitated for a moment, then picked up a stone and smashed it at the back of his neck. Perhaps it was the best choice to set him free completely. The setting sun stretched her shadow long. Cassandra looked back at the collapsing canyon, which had once been the so-called home of containers. She clenched the pottery shard in her hand. The characters written in her mother's blood had seeped into her skin and merged with the starred chart mark on her wrist. She knew she had to go to Sparta to find the Trojan horse that held the truth. The wind on the road carried the familiar aroma of the vineyards outside Troy. Cassandra's tears welled up. She remembered chasing butterflies with her younger brother in the vineyards as a child, her mother sitting under the olive tree knitting, and her father standing on the city wall looking out the distant sea. These memories had not been taken away. They were like seeds buried deep in her heart, waiting for the right time to take root and sprout. She touched the memory crystal at the small of her back. The fragment had grown together with her flesh, like a new bone. The figures in the crystal were floating quietly, as if in a deep sleep. Cassandra knew these were all the stolen memories, the seeds left by the Trojans, the Atlanteans, and countless purified civilizations. She didn't know how many dangers lay ahead, whether there were many so-called Athenas, or if her younger brother was still alive. But she knew she had to keep going because she was Container No. 37, the Eye of Osiris that her mother had protected with her life, and the only hope for those stolen memories. As night fell, Cassandra climbed a small hill. The distant sea sparkled with silver light. She remembered her father saying that at the end of the sea, there was a forgotten continent where people could remember everything. At that time, she'd thought it was a myth, but now she felt it might be true. She took out the small wooden carved horse her younger brother had given her from her bosom and used the dagger to pry open the base. There was indeed half a pottery shard hidden inside. When the two pottery shards were put together, the complete star chart emitted a soft blue light, illuminating the way to Sparta in the night. Cassandra hid the assembled pottery shard close to her body and tightened her grip on the bronze dagger. The wind blew through her hair, bringing the commotion from afar as if countless awakened memories were shouting. She took a deep breath and walked towards Sparta. Every step she took landed on her own shadow, as if chasing a promise that would never fade. This episode ends here. The next episode will be even more exciting. Come and subscribe.